So welcome everyone to this class. Most of you I actually already know. A lot of my family is here, so it's really good to see all of your wonderful faces. And then there are also some people that I don't know, and we are just meeting for the first time, which is also really exciting. So thank you so much for being here. If we have not met before, I'm just going to introduce myself and talk a little bit about what I do. My name is Erin Boyd. I am there we go. There we go. All right. My name is Erin Boyd, and I am a craniosacral therapist and a personal trainer who specializes in barefoot training and functional movement. I've been teaching movement for about 15 years, and right now I'm working out of my private studio in Northeast Portland. But the good news is that you don't have to be in Portland in order to work with me, because we have this amazing technology that lets us be together in the same room, even when we're not in the same city, which is pretty cool. So thank you, 2023. So we're gonna talk about one of my favorite topics, which is foot function. You are here for the Feel Your Feet workshop, which you probably already know because you signed up for it. I love talking about foot function. It is one of the reasons that I got into doing this work. My background is in dance, and I train my training clients, my functional movement clients, with bare feet, and foot function is a big part of that. So as you can imagine, foot function is pretty important and something I love talking about. So I'm excited to have you all here and share this with you. So a couple of weeks ago, I sent out a survey and I asked people what their biggest challenges were with their feet. And the number one response that was in almost every single reply to that survey was plantar fasciitis. It's a super common and very painful and pretty stubborn condition. Plantar fasciitis can be really tricky to deal with, and we're gonna talk a lot about that today. What it is inflammation of the plantar fascia, which is the tissue on the bottom of your foot. This tissue is very sensitive. So if you have ever stepped on a Lego, you are probably very familiar with the nerves on the bottom of your feet. It really hurts, right? There are a lot of reasons for that. Those nerves are actually made to be very sensitive because they are part of the proprioception that tells our nervous system kind of where we are in space and how to navigate the surfaces that we're standing and walking on. So there's a reason that it hurts when you step on that Lego. So plantar fasciitis is an inflammation of that tissue. A lot of times it's actually an impact injury. But that doesn't mean that you need to engage in high impact sports or activities in order to have plantar fasciitis. You can get it just by the way that you walk and the shoes that you wear, and things like that. So one way to think of it is if there's an imbalance in the way that you're distributing your weight onto your foot, then one part of your foot is probably going to get pretty sore over time, right? If you're striking with the same part of the foot over and over and over, it's going to result in inflammation at some point. You can sort of think of it like if you've ever had a housemate who never does the chores and you're left doing the dishes and taking out the trash and cleaning the floors and dusting and doing all of that by yourself, then you're probably going to get a little resentful, a little grumpy. You're going to get worn out, right? Our feet also get a little grumpy if we're exposing the same part of the foot to impact over and over and over rather than a more equal distribution. Another way to think of it is if your car is out of alignment, but you keep driving on it, and that makes an impact on the wear and tear of your tires, right? And over time, one of those tires is going to blow, right? So it's the same with our feet. So we're going to be talking a lot today about weight distribution, launching and loading patterns, and proprioception. Another thing, plantar fasciitis, the other thing I was going to mention about that. there can be other variables involved. For example, if you have like an autoimmune disease that is causing like a more systemic inflammation throughout your entire system, that can also show up in your feet. So the good news about that is that while that's not specifically what we're addressing today is autoimmune issues, the good news is that efficient movement patterns can actually help regulate your entire system. So in that way, it can be indirectly beneficial still for issues like that. The other thing that came up in the survey that I sent out was neuropathy, which is like a sort of numbness or a tingling in the extremities, which can also be very stubborn and a really frustrating issue. I actually have a little bit of neuropathy in my hands because I have a circulation disorder that affects my my feeling in my hands, and it's really not fun. For a lot of people, it shows up in their feet. For some people, it's both. So I completely understand it's a frustrating issue. The good news about that is that a lot of these same exercises can be good for both of these issues that we just talked about. Because one of the things we're going to be working on is kind of waking up those nerves in the feet and stimulating them so they kind of are able to turn on and just be a more active participant in our movement. So without further ado, we are going to talk about foot type. So once we determine what your foot type is, that's going to kind of help assess whether, how to utilize these exercises that we're going to do. So foot type can basically be broken down into two different categories. There are a bunch of little subcategories, but we only have 45 minutes, so I'm only going to get into two of them, which are a rigid foot type or a soft foot type. And the way that we determine this is the movement pattern that is easiest for the foot, whether that is launching or loading. So your foot, if this is the arch of your foot, right, it's actually not a rigid structure. It's dynamic. So the arch is meant to soften and form every time you walk. So when you load weight onto the foot, it actually softens and it comes closer to the ground. When you're launching your weight and stepping off of that foot, the arch lifts and it becomes more rigid. So ideally, a healthy foot should be able to move back and forth between those two positions fairly quickly. So when it comes to foot types, the way that we assess that is that a more rigid foot type is one that has a more locked position of that arch being formed. It doesn't necessarily just mean that you have high arches. It can, but not necessarily. You can have a high arch and a softer foot type. It just means that this is the pattern that your foot prefers and that it has a hard time with the second part or the loading part of that phase. So that's going to be a more rigid foot type. A soft foot type, as you can probably guess, is the opposite of that. That is the foot type where the foot prefers a flatter arch and it has a hard time forming the arch when you're launching weight. And the way that we address that is by strengthening the intrinsic muscles of the foot. So we're going to do a quick assessment and we're going to figure out what your foot type is. So this is where I'm going to tilt my camera down a little bit. So if you do type something into the chat and I don't see it right away, just know that I will get to it. And I'm going to get rid of my socks here. It is fine to leave your socks on if you'd like. If it is cold where you are, especially if you have something like neuropathy, I definitely recommend keeping your feet warm. You can still do this exercise. So, is my feet okay? So just stand with your feet about hip distance apart, and you're going to feel an equal amount of weight between the big toe and the pinky toe, right? So if you're just doing a quick sort of scan of the bottom of your feet, you might feel more weight on the outer edge or the inner edge. But see if you can kind of shift a little bit and find somewhere in the middle. And then just notice what muscles you have to shift in order to make that happen. Okay, so we're going for equal weight between the big toe and the pinky toe. Okay, and then we're going to think about front to back. So find equal weight between the toes and the heel. So for me, that's about here. It's really subtle. You might not really be able to see it very much, but if you can feel it in your own body, that's where it's really going to be beneficial. So then from here, once you found that kind of neutral position, so 50% side to side, 50% back to back, shift your weight towards the pinky toes and feel the arch of your foot lift. And you might feel your femurs or your thigh bones actually move out a little bit. So you can kind of see how mine widened. So this is the position your foot makes when the arch lifts. You might even feel it a little bit. Then from here, go ahead and shift your weight towards the inside of your foot. So I'm rolling my weight towards my big toes and the inside of my heel, and you can kind of see how my femurs come in towards each other a little bit when I do that. So just do that a couple times back and forth, trying to still maintain that 50% balance from the front of the foot to the back of the foot. And as you do this, you will probably notice that one of those movements comes much more easily than the other. So one is going to feel very familiar, one is going to feel very unfamiliar. And the movement that feels less familiar or more difficult is probably going to be the one that you have the biggest challenge with. And the one that's easier, we typically associate that with your foot type. There are other ways to do an assessment that's kind of difficult to do yourself unless you have a camera and you're looking at the back of your foot. And if you have questions about that or you want to do an assessment, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to hop on Zoom and just watch you walk, watch you stand, and see if we can get a little bit more information from you. So hopefully you have an idea of what your foot type is. And if not, that's totally okay, because the exercises that we're going to do are actually really good for both, because we're going to work on that transition between the loading phase and the launching phase of the foot. So we're going to talk about proprioception next, which is one of my favorite superpowers of the feet. I just think it is so cool. Proprioception basically just means the awareness of your body in space, right? So to get an idea of how we use proprioception, if you look around the room and just find a spot to focus on, and it could be like a light switch or a doorknob or a spot on the wall, whatever it is, and just take a look at that spot, and then in your mind's eye, see if you can envision how many steps it would take you to reach that spot. And if you want to, you can even get up and see if you're right. So come up with a number, see how many steps it takes you, and see how accurate you are. And that is basically proprioception. It's just our body's way of letting us know how far away we are from an object or the surface that we're on. So when it comes to our feet, what that means is that the proprioceptors, or the nerves on our feet, give our nervous system information about where we are in space so that it can organize our joints to keep us safe. So it's the way that you know how to walk on ice versus walking in sand. You don't have to know that you're on ice to know that you're on ice, right? Your feet can feel it and your body responds to that surface. Same thing with walking in sand. So it's the same idea, and that's how it works with the nerves in our feet. So this next thing we're going to do is a little proprioception exercise. It's also going to open up the joints in our feet and create a little bit of mobility. So this is where that lacrosse ball comes in. So if you signed up for this class a while ago, I had written in the newsletter that it would be good to have like a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball, one of those big bouncy balls that you get at the toy store, like anything about this size-ish, and not too hard. I typically don't recommend using a golf ball. Some people do. I find that they tend to be a little bit too intense, especially for people who have very sensitive feet. But if that is all you have on hand, that's totally fine. We'll work with it. And if you don't have anything, then you're going to get the replay. So you can always do this later when you've got something handy. So otherwise, just watch and follow along. So I'm going to bring my laptop down again to the floor so you can see what my feet are doing here. Okay, so I'm going to take my lacrosse ball and put it on the floor. And I'm going to put my foot on it right in front of my heel. So we've got just a real quick anatomy overview here. From here to here is your rear foot. From here to here, we call the midfoot. And from here to here is the forefoot. So it's pretty straightforward, rear, mid, fore. The rear foot starts right in front of starts or ends, depending on how you look at it. But the joint that we're focusing on is going to be right in front of your heel. And then my ball is on the inside of my foot. So I've got my weight on the back foot, and I'm just going to shift my weight forward onto that ball a few times. If you have severe plantar fasciitis, neuropathy, something else going on in your foot that makes this really painful, I want you to back off and use less pressure or do it sitting in a chair. You should not have to hurt yourself for this class. It's meant to feel good. It's not meant to be painful. So if it does feel like you're stepping on a Lego, then just back off the pressure a little bit. And doing this in a chair is perfectly acceptable. You're still going to get a lot of benefit from it. So I'm just kind of pushing into that joint a little bit. And then I'm going to anchor through my big toe. So I'm anchoring through here. And I'm just going to wiggle side to side. And I'm keeping it pretty small. So it's a very small surface area that I'm focused on. Sort of like I'm putting out a cigarette, if you've ever done that, which I have not. But I've watched Olivia Newton-John do it a lot in Greece. So I don't know. That's what I picture every time I do this. There are a lot of musical theater references in my classes, just for the record. I can't help it. All right, so now I'm going to put the ball in the middle of the foot, also right in front of the calcaneus. So now I've got a good stable base there. And again, I'm just going to kind of rock back and forth. I'm shifting my weight forward and back. And then a little wiggle side to side. It's a small movement. And then I'm going to increase that range, and I'm going to go all the way from the inside of the foot to the outside of the foot. Or medial to lateral, if you want to get fancy. Okay? Then I'm going to go to the forefoot, and it's going to go right behind the ball of my big toe. And same thing, shifting a little bit forward. And I'm really controlling the pressure with my back leg. So I can put as much or as little weight into that as I want. And then the same thing, a little bit of side to side movement. You're anchoring through the heel. This is a really sensitive area for a lot of people. For me, it's one of the most sensitive. I have to really be aware of my pressure right here. And then we're just going to quickly do a pass through the ball of each toe. So I'm just going to do big toe, second toe, third, fourth, and fifth. And then I'm going to go all the way side to side. So I'm really going across each metatarsal of the foot, trying to maintain equal pressure the whole time. Then I'm going to go from the ball of each foot towards the heel. So it's creating this kind of fan shape. Again, trying to keep equal pressure. So I just did the first toe, second toe towards the heel, third toe towards the heel, fourth toe, and the fifth toe. Then a little bit of creative liberties here. You can just scribble, 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 scribble. Like you've got a crayon, you're coloring outside the lines. Excellent. All right, let's do the other side. So I'm just going to shift here. Inside of the foot, right in front of the heel or the calcaneus. And you may notice that one side feels very different from the other. And side dominance actually has a lot to do with that, which I'm thinking about doing a whole course on side dominance as well, because it really does make a big difference in our movement patterns. It's a lot more than just being right-handed or left-handed. It can really make an impact in how we move. So if that's something that any of you are interested in, I would love to know, because I may be putting that class together soon. All right, and then middle of the heel. And then we're going to go side to side. We won't spend quite as much time on this side because we have one more exercise to do, and I want to leave room for questions at the end. But again, you'll get the replay, so if you want to spend more time here, you definitely can. Front of the foot, shift the weight. You might feel some kind of snap, crackle, pop going on in there. We have a lot of joints in our feet. There's 33 joints in your feet. So there's a lot of opportunity for things to shift and move around. So if you feel some popping, just know that's super normal. We're going to go down each. Ooh, there we go. I got a good pop. Going all the way through each toe now. And then side to side. Like my foot is a windshield wiper. All right, and then each toe toward the heel. Ooh. The ball wiggles away from you a little bit. That's also perfectly normal. Okay, and then scribble. Scribble, scribble, scribble. Okay. Oh, that felt great. I am going to put my ball over here. Hopefully, sometimes my dog sees me do this and she thinks that the ball is for her. So hopefully she won't hide it from me this time. I found it behind the couch this morning. Okay, so go ahead and come back to 2 feet, just underneath your hips, normal stance, and just notice if anything feels different. It might or it might not. This is just an assessment. You may feel like your feet are a little bit more connected to the ground. They may feel a little bit tingly, more aware. Those are all things that I commonly hear. It might be different for you, but we're just kind of noticing if anything changed. Okay. All right, so I hope that was helpful for you all. The next thing that we're going to do is an exercise called short foot. We're also going to do this on each foot, and it's called short foot because we are literally making the foot shorter. And that's how we strengthen the intrinsic arch of the foot to help coordinate that transition between the launching phase and the loading phase. All right, so for this one, I'm going to leave my camera up here, but just tilt it down a little bit so that you can see more of my foot, or more of my leg, I mean. So I'm gonna still start in the split stance. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lift my toes up and then place them back down on the floor. Now, ideally, you want to be able to have a little bit of space between your toes. So if you're one of those people that can really spread your toes out, if you're like a yogi who has a ton of articulation and mobility in your feet, that's awesome. I am not one of those people. My feet, my toes do not like to move independently of each other. So what I do is actually reach down and physically use my fingers to kind of spread them apart. And if you don't get a lot of space between them, that's also fine. Don't overthink it. From here, I'm going to start with my weight and my back foot. I'm going to push the ball of my big toe into the ground, and I'm going to let the arch lift up. So we're creating that dome or that arch shape of the foot. It might feel like your foot is going to start to cramp a little bit if this is a movement that you're not used to doing. That is totally normal. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you, and it doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. It just means this is an unfamiliar movement, and it might take a few practices in order for it to feel more comfortable. So if it starts to cramp, I recommend just backing off. Again, you will get the replay, so you can always try it again later. All right? We're going to lift that arch of the foot, and then I'm going to shift my weight onto it and let the arch flatten and the toes spread. And you can see how I have a lot of bend in my knee, a lot of bend in my hip. That's what helps load that weight onto the foot. I'm going to push into the ground, not just lift my body up, but I'm pushing into the ground with that front foot to come back. All right, that is short foot. Do it one more time on this side. I'm lifting, creating that arch, shifting off of the back foot, letting the arch fall and the toes spread. A lot of knee bend, a lot of hip bend. That helps load the hip as well. Okay. So that is short foot. You can absolutely do this on both sides. For today, I think we're going to stop there for the sake of time. But you can just rewatch this and repeat it on the other side if you'd like. You can also reach out to me with questions if you want, if there's like something that you're stuck on and not quite sure. I will throw my email in the chat. I also have a 4-week series coming up on foot function. So if you enjoyed this and you found some benefit to it, I encourage you to sign up for that. I'll actually throw the link to that in the chat right now. And my contact, this will just take you straight to my website. So all the contact information is in there as well. There is the link to sign up. 4-week series starts on March 17th. So if you enjoyed this and you want to know more, then there you go. All right, does anybody have questions about what we did today? Just go ahead and type it in the chat if you don't mind. Or anything that you found beneficial, anything that you learned that you want to share. Nothing? Okay, all right, sounds good. All right, then I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Stop recording.